Tonight I want to take you somewhere special, somewhere at the very edge of what we think we know about reality itself. It's a place where the smallest things in the universe whisper secrets that even our most brilliant minds struggle to fully comprehend. Tonight, we're going to explore a question that might sound almost impossible at first, something that seems to challenge everything we learned in school about the building blocks of matter. Are electrons made of light? It's a question that might sound strange at first, something you could easily dismiss as mixing up two completely different things, but the more we look at it, the more quietly intriguing it becomes. You see, electrons and light have been dancing together in the equations of physics for over a century now, partners in a cosmic ballet that we're only beginning to understand. What if electrons, those tiny particles that flow through every wire in your home, that orbit every atom in your body, what if they were not just solid little balls of matter, but something far more mysterious, perhaps even woven from the very fabric of light itself? Before we drift deeper into this mystery together, I'm curious about where you are right now. Are you tucked into bed in London, watching the rain tap gently against your window? Or perhaps you're in Tokyo, and it's already tomorrow where you are. Maybe you're in New York and the city lights are dimming outside as the night deepens. Whatever corner of our planet you're resting in tonight, whatever time your clock is showing, we're connected now by this shared moment of wonder. And if you find yourself enjoying this peaceful journey through the mysteries of physics, perhaps you'd like to gently tap that subscribe button so we can explore more of these cosmic secrets together on other quiet nights. Think of it as leaving a small light on, a gentle reminder that there are always more mysteries waiting for us in the darkness. Now, let's settle in and begin our journey properly. Close your eyes if you'd like, or let them rest softly on whatever is comfortable. Tonight we're going to travel to places smaller than atoms, faster than thought, where the rules of reality become soft and strange. We'll move through spaces where particles and waves merge into something that defies our everyday understanding. The question of whether electrons are made of light isn't just a technical puzzle for physicists to solve in their laboratories. It's a doorway into understanding the very nature of existence itself, a gentle invitation to see reality not as solid and fixed, but as something far more fluid, far more beautiful than we ever imagined. Imagine for a moment that you could shrink down, smaller and smaller, past the cells in your body, past the molecules that make up those cells, past even the atoms themselves. As you descend into this microscopic realm, the familiar world would fade away, replaced by something that looks nothing like the solid matter we know. Down here, in the quantum realm, electrons don't orbit atomic nuclei like planets around a sun. Instead, they exist in probability clouds, sometimes here, sometimes there, never quite anywhere until we look. And strangest of all, these electrons, these fundamental particles that we've always thought of as tiny bits of matter, they behave in ways that seem impossible. They can be in two places at once. They can tunnel through barriers that should be impenetrable. They can communicate instantly across vast distances. And perhaps most mysteriously of all, they seem to share a deep fundamental connection with light itself. You see, every electron in the universe is constantly interacting with light, even in the darkest spaces between galaxies. They absorb photons, those packets of light energy, and they emit them. They dance with electromagnetic fields, responding to every ripple and wave. In fact, when physicists first started writing down the equations that govern electrons, they discovered something remarkable. The math that describes electrons and the math that describes light are intimately connected, woven together in ways that suggest these aren't two separate phenomena at all, but different faces of something deeper, something more fundamental. Let me take you back to the early 20th century, to a time when physicists were just beginning to peek behind the curtain of reality. Einstein had just shown us that light wasn't simply a wave, as everyone had believed, but also came in discrete packets called photons. Meanwhile, other scientists were discovering that electrons, which everyone thought were simply tiny particles, also behaved like waves. This was the birth of quantum mechanics, and it turned everything we thought we knew upside down. Suddenly, the neat distinction between matter and energy, between particles and waves, began to blur. And in that blurring, in that soft space between categories, lies our question tonight. If electrons behave like waves, and light behaves like particles, then what exactly is the difference between them? Could it be that at some fundamental level, they're made of the same stuff? The mathematical framework that emerged from these discoveries, quantum field theory, paints a picture of reality that would have seemed like pure fantasy just a century ago. In this picture, empty space isn't empty at all. Instead, it's filled with invisible fields, stretching in every direction, vibrating with potential energy. The electromagnetic field is one of these, extending throughout all of space, and photons, particles of light, are simply ripples in this field. But here's where it gets interesting. Electrons also have their own field, the electron field, and electrons are ripples in that field. These two fields, the electromagnetic field and the electron field, they don't exist in isolation. They're constantly interacting, constantly exchanging energy, constantly transforming into each other in ways that make the distinction between electron and photon seem almost artificial. Think about what happens when an electron in an atom absorbs a photon. The photon doesn't just bump into the electron like one billiard ball hitting another. Instead, the photon ceases to exist, its energy becoming part of the electron, lifting it to a higher energy state. And when that electron falls back down, it creates a new photon, seemingly from nothing, releasing the energy it had stored. This isn't just energy transfer as we understand it in our everyday world. This is transformation, transmutation, matter and light becoming one another in an endless dance. Every atom in your body is doing this right now, billions of times per second, electrons and photons merging and separating, matter and light in constant conversation. As we drift deeper into this mystery, consider the work of physicist Richard Feynman, who developed a way of understanding particle interactions that revolutionized physics. In Feynman's diagrams, electrons and photons aren't fixed entities but rather temporary manifestations of something more fundamental. An electron moving through space is constantly emitting and reabsorbing virtual photons. Photons that exist for such brief moments that they can't even be directly observed. These virtual photons form a cloud around every electron, a shimmering halo of potential light that defines how the electron interacts with everything around it. In a very real sense, you can't have an electron without this cloud of virtual photons. They're inseparable, two aspects of a single phenomenon. But let's go even deeper. Some physicists have proposed that electrons might actually be made of confined light, photons trapped in impossibly small loops, spinning at the speed of light in circles so tiny that they appear to us as particles. This isn't mainstream physics, not yet anyway, but it's not pseudoscience either. It's a genuine attempt to understand why electrons have the properties they do, why they have exactly the mass they have, why they spin the way they do, why they interact with light in such specific ways. Imagine light, pure electromagnetic energy, twisted into a knot so tight that it can't escape, forced to orbit around itself forever. This trapped light would have mass, not because it contains matter in the traditional sense, but because of the energy confined in that tiny space. Einstein showed us that energy and mass are equivalent, E equals mc squared, and a trapped photon, unable to fly away at the speed of light, would manifest as mass. This idea becomes even more intriguing when we consider that electrons have a property called spin, though it's not spin in the way we usually think of it. An electron isn't actually rotating like a tiny planet. Instead, it has an intrinsic, angular momentum, a fundamental property that defines how it interacts with magnetic fields. But if an electron were made of confined light, circulating at the speed of a light in a tiny loop, this might naturally give rise to exactly the kind of spin we observe. The mathematics is complex, still being worked out in research papers that few people will ever read, but the possibility is there, whispering in the equations. Now you might wonder, if electrons could be made of light, why don't we see this directly? Why does an electron seem so different from a photon in our experiments? Part of the answer lies in the nature of confinement itself. A photon traveling freely through space has no mass and moves at the speed of light, but trap that same photon, force it into a closed loop, and everything changes. It can no longer travel at light speed because it's going in circles. It gains an effective mass from its trapped energy. It develops properties that free photons don't have. In essence, confinement transforms light into something that looks and acts like matter. There's something deeply poetic about this possibility. Every object around you, everything you can touch and see, your own body, all of it made of atoms, and atoms made of electrons and protons and neutrons. And if electrons are indeed made of confined light, then in a very real sense we are beings of light, not in some mystical way, but literally scientifically. The light is just trapped, condensed, woven into patterns so complex that they become matter, become flesh, become consciousness itself, contemplating its own nature. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. This is still speculative, still at the edges of what physics can currently prove. What we do know for certain is that the relationship between electrons and light is far more intimate than most people realize. In quantum electrodynamics, our most successful theory of how electrons and photons interact, the distinction between them becomes almost meaningless at the smallest scales. They're constantly transforming into each other, virtual electron-positron pairs emerging from energetic photons, then annihilating back into light. The vacuum of space itself seethes with these transformations, matter and antimatter, electrons and positrons, appearing and disappearing in a cosmic foam of possibility. Consider what happens in a particle accelerator when electrons are pushed to nearly the speed of light. As they race around the circular track, they emit synchrotron radiation, streams of photons flying off tangentially. The faster the electrons go, the more energy they radiate as light. It's as if the electrons are shedding light, unable to hold on to it at such extreme speeds. And if you could push an electron to exactly the speed of light, which is impossible but interesting to imagine, it would have to give up all its mass energy as radiation. It would in essence become light. This brings us to one of the deepest mysteries in physics, the nature of mass itself. We think of mass as a fundamental property of matter, but modern physics suggests it's actually something that particles acquire through their interactions with fields. The Higgs field, discovered just over a decade ago, gives particles like electrons their mass by slowing them down, preventing them from traveling at the speed of light. But photons don't interact with the Higgs field, which is why they remain massless and can travel at light speed. So the difference between an electron and a photon might not be what they're made of, but how they interact with the invisible fields that fill all of space. Think about this for a moment. The electron, with its mass of about 9 times 10 to the negative 31st kilograms, seems so different from a massless photon. But that mass, that tiny bit of inertia that makes the electron a particle of matter rather than a particle of light, comes from its interaction with an invisible field. Without the Higgs field, electrons would be massless, would travel at the speed of light, would be, in essence, another form of light itself. The universe had to develop this special field, this cosmic molasses that slows certain particles down, just to create the distinction between matter and light that makes atoms, molecules, and life itself possible. As we contemplate these ideas, floating here in the space between understanding and mystery, it's worth remembering that physics has surprised us before. A century ago, no one imagined that matter and energy were equivalent. No one dreamed that particles could be waves. No one suspected that the vacuum of space was actually teeming with virtual particles. Each generation of physicists has discovered that reality is stranger, more beautiful, more interconnected than the previous generation imagined. And perhaps we're on the verge of another such revelation, another peeling back of the veil that separates what we think we know from what actually is. The idea that electrons might be made of light touches on something even deeper, the possibility that all the different particles we observe, electrons, quarks, neutrinos, all of them, might be different patterns or modes of vibration in some more fundamental field. String theory, though still unproven, suggests something like this, that at the smallest possible scale, everything is made of tiny vibrating strings of energy. These strings would be far smaller than electrons, far smaller than anything we can currently observe, but their different modes of vibration would give rise to all the particles we see. And what are these strings made of? Perhaps they're made of nothing more than geometry itself, tiny loops in the fabric of space-time, or perhaps they're made of something we don't have words for yet, something that underlies both matter and light, both space and time. As you lie there, breathing softly, consider that with each breath, countless electrons in your lungs are absorbing and emitting photons, helping oxygen bind to hemoglobin, carrying energy throughout your body. The very process of life depends on this intimate dance between electrons and light. In your eyes, right now, even with them closed, electrons in rhodopsin molecules are waiting to absorb photons, ready to trigger the cascade of events that becomes vision. In every cell of your body, Electrons are shuttling through protein complexes, carrying energy derived ultimately from sunlight, photons captured by plants, and transformed through the food chain into the chemical energy that keeps you alive. We live in a universe where the boundary between light and matter is not a wall but a doorway, constantly crossed in both directions. Stars forge heavy elements by forcing electrons and protons together, releasing floods of photons in the process. Those photons travel across space, sometimes for billions of years, until they strike electrons in other atoms, perhaps in a telescope mirror, perhaps in your eye, carrying information about their origins across cosmic distances. And in particle colliders, we reverse this process, smashing electrons and positrons together to create pure energy, pure light, which then condenses back into new particles, new forms of matter we've never seen before. The question we started with tonight, are electrons made of light, leads us naturally to an even deeper question. What is light made of? We call photons particles of light, but that just pushes the mystery back a step. A photon is a ripple in the electromagnetic field, but what is the electromagnetic field? It's not made of anything else, as far as we know. It simply exists, a fundamental feature of reality, as basic as space and time themselves. Perhaps even more basic, since electromagnetic fields can exist without matter, but matter cannot exist without electromagnetic fields. Some physicists wonder if space and time themselves might emerge from something more fundamental. Perhaps from information, perhaps from quantum entanglement, perhaps from something we haven't imagined yet. And if space and time are emergent rather than fundamental, then what we call electrons and photons might be emergent too, patterns that arise from some deeper layer of reality, like waves on an ocean we can't directly perceive. We see the waves and think they're separate things, but underneath, it's all one ocean, one unified field of existence expressing itself in countless forms. As we drift through these ideas, feeling the gentle pull of sleep beginning to tug at consciousness, remember that uncertainty is not a failure of science, but its greatest strength. Every question answered reveals 10 new questions, each more wonderful than the last. The fact that we don't know for certain whether electrons are made of light means there are still mysteries to solve, still discoveries to make, still moments of awe waiting for us in equations yet to be written. Picture yourself floating now in a vast sea of possibility, surrounded by fields that stretch to infinity. The electromagnetic field shimmers around you, ready to manifest as light at any moment. The electron field pulses gently, prepared to condense into particles of matter. These fields overlap, interact, dance together in patterns too complex for our minds to fully grasp. And you are made of these patterns, these dancing fields, these marriages of light and matter that somehow learn to think, to wonder, to ask questions about their own nature. Every electron in your body has existed since the early moments after the Big Bang, when the universe was nothing but a hot soup of particles and radiation. These electrons have been part of stars, part of planets, part of countless other beings throughout cosmic history. They've absorbed and emitted photons beyond counting, each interaction a tiny conversation between matter and light, and now they're part of you, still dancing, still transforming, still participating in the eternal exchange between electron and photon that keeps the universe dynamic and alive. The mathematics that describes this dance is beautiful in its precision. Maxwell's equations, which govern electromagnetic fields, fit on a single page but describe everything from radio waves to gamma rays. The Dirac equation, which describes electrons, predicted the existence of antimatter before it was ever observed. Quantum electrodynamics makes predictions accurate to 1 part in a trillion, making it the most precise theory humans have ever created. And yet, for all this precision, we still don't know exactly what an electron is, whether it's truly fundamental or made of something else, whether it's a point particle or has some tiny but finite size, whether it's made of confined light or something even stranger. This isn't a failure of physics, but rather a testament to the depth of reality. The universe doesn't owe us simple answers. It doesn't have to be comprehensible to human minds that evolved to navigate the African savanna, not the quantum realm. The fact that we can even ask whether electrons are made of light, that we can probe reality at scales trillions of times smaller than anything our ancestors could see, that we can write equations that describe the behavior of particles we'll never directly observe, this itself is miraculous. Consider the device you're listening to this on, whether it's a phone, a computer, a tablet. It's powered by electrons flowing through silicon circuits, controlled by electric fields, displaying images using light-emitting diodes or liquid crystals that manipulate photons. The entire device is a symphony of electrons and photons, matter and light working together in patterns of impossible complexity. And yet it works, reliably, predictably, because we've learned just enough about how electrons and photons behave to harness their dance for our purposes. But there's so much more we don't know. We don't know why electrons have exactly the mass they do, why their charge is exactly equal and opposite to a proton's charge, why there are 3 generations of matter particles instead of just 1 or 100. We don't know if electrons are truly stable, or if they might decay over timescales longer than the current age of the universe. We don't know if the electron is fundamental or composite, point-like or extended, eternal or temporary. What we do know is that electrons and photons are partners in the cosmic dance that creates everything we experience. From the nuclear fusion in stars that creates the elements, to the chemistry in our cells that sustains life, to the thoughts in our brains as neurons fire, sending electrical signals that somehow become consciousness, none of it would be possible without the intricate interplay between electrons and light. As you feel yourself beginning to drift towards sleep, carried by the gentle rhythm of these ideas, remember that you don't need to understand everything to appreciate the mystery. The universe keeps its deepest secrets not out of malice, but perhaps out of kindness, giving each generation something new to discover, new reasons to wonder. The question of whether electrons are made of light may be answered in your lifetime, or it may remain a mystery for centuries to come. Either way, the question itself is a gift, an invitation to see the familiar world with new eyes, to recognize the mystery in the ordinary, the cosmic in the commonplace. Right now, in the darkness behind your closed eyelids, electrons and photons are dancing. In the cells of your retina, in the neurons of your brain, in every atom of your being, the same fundamental forces that govern distant galaxies are at work. You're not separate from the universe, but woven from its very fabric, made of the same light that streams from stars, the same electrons that flow through cosmic magnetic fields, the same quantum fields that fill the vacuum of space. Perhaps tomorrow, scientists will discover that electrons really are made of confined light, twisted into stable knots by forces we're only beginning to understand. Or perhaps they'll discover something even stranger, that both electrons and photons are made of something else entirely, some deeper unity that we haven't imagined yet. The beautiful thing about science is that it's always provisional, always ready to be surprised, always prepared to revise its understanding when new evidence emerges. But for tonight, for this moment, it's enough to rest in the mystery, to float in the space between known and unknown, between light and matter, between question and answer. Let the uncertainty be a comfort rather than a concern. You don't need to solve the mysteries of the universe tonight. You don't need to understand quantum field theory or the standard model of particle physics. You just need to breathe, to rest, to let your mind drift like an electron in its probability cloud, existing in all possible states until the moment of observation collapses you gently into sleep. Think of yourself as a collection of fields, rippling gently in the cosmic ocean. The electromagnetic field extends from you in all directions, carrying information about your presence out into the universe at the speed of light. Every electron in your body is connected to every other electron through these fields, through virtual photons that flash in and out of existence faster than thought. You're not a separate, isolated being, but a pattern in the universal fields, a temporary arrangement of energy that has somehow become aware of itself. The atoms in your body are mostly empty space, with electrons orbiting nuclei at distances that, scaled up, would be like planets orbiting the sun, and yet you feel solid, substantial, real. This solidity is an illusion created by electromagnetic forces, by electrons in your atoms repelling electrons in other atoms, creating the sensation of touch, of substance, of matter. But underneath this illusion of solidity, you are mostly emptiness, mostly fields, mostly potential waiting to be actualized. As sleep approaches, bringing its own mysteries and transformations, consider that consciousness itself might be another face of the same phenomenon we've been exploring. Just as electrons and photons might be different manifestations of something deeper, Perhaps mind and matter, consciousness and cosmos, are also different faces of a single reality. Perhaps the universe is conscious in some sense we don't understand. Perhaps consciousness is fundamental like electromagnetic fields. Perhaps the distinction between observer and observed is as artificial as the distinction between wave and particle. These are not scientific claims, but rather gentle speculations, invitations to wonder as you drift toward dreams. Science tells us what we can measure and test, but it doesn't tell us everything. There are truths that equations can't capture, beauties that mathematics can't describe, mysteries that may forever elude our instruments and theories, and perhaps that's as it should be. Perhaps a universe that could be fully understood would be less wonderful than one that always keeps some secrets in reserve. The electron, that tiny particle that we've been contemplating tonight, carries a negative electric charge. But why negative? The choice of calling it negative was arbitrary, made by Benjamin Franklin before anyone knew what electric charge really was. We could just as easily have called it positive. But there's something poetic about electrons being negative, about matter being built from particles that are defined by what they lack, by the opposite of positive. It reminds us that our understanding is always incomplete, always based on conventions and choices that could have been different. And yet, despite our incomplete understanding, despite all the mysteries that remain, we've learned enough to glimpse the underlying unity of nature. The same equations that describe electrons in atoms describe electrons in stars. The same photons that warm your face on a sunny day are the photons that carry information across the cosmos. The same quantum mechanics that seem so strange and counterintuitive is the quantum mechanics that makes life possible, that allows DNA to replicate, proteins to fold, neurons to fire. You are listening to these words because electrons in my recording device converted sound waves to electrical signals, which were converted to digital information, streams of zeros and ones represented by different voltage levels, different arrangements of electrons. This information was transmitted perhaps through copper wires where electrons actually flowed, perhaps through fiber optic cables where photons carried the signal, perhaps through radio waves where electromagnetic fields propagated through space. And now, in your device, the process reverses, electrons moving in response to those signals, creating vibrations in speakers that move air molecules, that vibrate your eardrums, that trigger nerve impulses that your brain interprets as words, as ideas, as meaning. Every step in this chain depends on the intimate relationship between electrons and photons, between matter and light. Without this relationship, there would be no technology, no communication, no way for me to share these thoughts with you across the distances that separate us. But more fundamentally, without this relationship, there would be no atoms, no chemistry, no biology, no us. We exist because electrons and photons can interact, because matter and light can exchange energy and information, because the universe allows for this beautiful dance between different aspects of its nature. The question we've been exploring tonight, whether electrons are made of light, touches on the deepest mysteries of existence. It asks us to reconsider what we mean by made of, what we mean by fundamental, what we mean by understanding itself. Perhaps electrons are made of light in some sense we don't yet comprehend. Perhaps they're both made of something else, something for which we don't yet have words. Perhaps the question itself is wrong, like asking what color is the number 7, mixing categories that shouldn't be mixed. But wrong questions can sometimes lead to right answers, or at least to better questions. The history of physics is full of wrong questions that open new doors. Is light a wave or a particle? Neither and both. Does the electron orbit the nucleus? Not in any classical sense. Does time flow at the same rate everywhere? No, it depends on gravity and motion. Each wrong question revealed assumptions we didn't know we were making, boundaries we didn't know existed until we tried to cross them. So perhaps asking whether electrons are made of light is another wrong question that will lead us somewhere unexpected. Perhaps it will reveal that our distinction between matter and force, between particle and field, between substance and void, is itself an artifact of our limited perspective. Perhaps future physicists will look back on our current understanding the way we look back on the ancient Greeks' 4 elements, seeing the truth hidden within the error, the intuition struggling to express itself through inadequate concepts. But these are thoughts for tomorrow's scientists to pursue. Tonight, as you rest, as you prepare to cross the threshold into sleep, you don't need answers. You need only the gentle awareness that you are part of something vast and beautiful, something that includes both the cosmic and the quantum, both the known and the unknown, both light and matter in their eternal dance. Feel yourself settling deeper now, your breathing becoming slower and more regular. With each breath, countless electrons in your lungs are facilitating the exchange of oxygen and carbon dioxide, a process that depends on quantum mechanics, on the specific way electrons are arranged in molecules, on the precise energies of photons absorbed and emitted. You are a quantum being living in a quantum universe, even if your conscious mind operates at scales where quantum effects average out to classical behavior. The boundary between waking and sleeping is like the boundary between electron and photon, seemingly clear from a distance but fuzzy up close, a gradual transition rather than a sharp line. As you drift across this boundary, you're experiencing your own wave-particle duality, sometimes focused like a particle on a specific thought, sometimes spread out like a wave across multiple possibilities. Your consciousness is performing its own uncertainty dance, not quite here, not quite there, existing in the space between. In your dreams tonight, you might find yourself traveling at the speed of light, experiencing the universe as a photon does, with all of space contracted to a single point, all of time collapsed to a single moment. Or you might find yourself as an electron, probabilistic and uncertain, existing everywhere and nowhere until the moment of observation. These dreams, should they come, are not just fantasies but glimpses of real physics, real properties of the universe that your subconscious mind is free to explore without the constraints of classical logic. The mystery we've contemplated tonight, whether electrons are made of light, will still be there when you wake. It's not going anywhere. The universe will continue its patient revelations, offering clues to those who look carefully, hiding its secrets in plain sight. Perhaps by the time you wake, somewhere in the world, a physicist will have had a new insight, written a new equation, designed a new experiment that brings us one step closer to understanding. Or perhaps the mystery will deepen, as mysteries often do when we look at them closely. But for now, for this precious moment between waking and sleeping, you can rest in not knowing. You can float in the space between questions and answers, between light and matter, between consciousness and cosmos. You're made of star stuff, as Carl Sagan said. But more specifically, you are made of electrons that might themselves be made of light, which means you are made of the same radiance that illuminates the universe, temporarily condensed into this form you call yourself. Every electron in your body is connected to every photon in the universe through the electromagnetic field. Every photon that has ever interacted with an electron in your body has carried information about you out into the cosmos. In a very real sense, you are not contained within your skin but spread throughout the universe, a pattern of interactions extending across space and time. The light from stars that will reach Earth long after you're gone is already on its way, has been traveling for millions of years, carrying information about events that happened before our sun was born. And the light from you, the electromagnetic radiation you emit simply by being warm, is beginning its own journey into the cosmos, carrying information about this moment, this breath, this heartbeat out into the universe. Perhaps that's what we are in the end, not solid matter but patterns of information, arrangements of electrons and photons that temporarily cohere into something that can wonder about its own nature. The question of whether electrons are made of light is really a question about what we are made of, what everything is made of, what it means to be made of anything at all in a universe where everything is constantly transforming into everything else. As you drift deeper towards sleep, let these ideas wash over you like gentle waves, not demanding understanding but simply offering presence. The universe doesn't require you to solve its mysteries. It only asks that you participate in them, that you be part of the ongoing transformation between matter and energy, between order and entropy, between knowledge and mystery. Your existence is already an answer to questions the universe has been asking since the Big Bang. What forms can matter take? How complex can arrangements of electrons become? Can the universe know itself through the consciousness of its constituent parts? You are the universe's way of contemplating electrons and photons, matter and light, existence itself. Through your wonder, the cosmos wonders at itself. Through your questions, it questions its own nature. Through your gradual descent into sleep, it explores the boundary between consciousness and unconsciousness, between observation and possibility, between the collapsed wave function of waking and the superposition of dreams. The electrons in your brain are still firing, creating the electromagnetic patterns that somehow give rise to thoughts and dreams. Even in sleep, the dance continues. Photons are still being absorbed and emitted. Electrons are still flowing through ion channels, maintaining the electrical potentials that keep you alive. The fundamental physics continues its work, indifferent to whether you're conscious of it or not, maintaining the patterns that are you with a faithfulness that we barely understand. Tomorrow you'll wake and probably won't think about electrons or photons. You'll go about your day interacting with light and matter in countless ways, without contemplating their fundamental nature. You'll flip switches that control electron flow. You'll see colors that are specific wavelengths of light. You'll use technologies that depend on quantum mechanics, all without needing to understand the underlying physics. And that's as it should be. We don't need to understand everything to live, to love, to find meaning and beauty in existence. But perhaps, in some quiet moment tomorrow, you'll remember this journey we've taken together. You'll remember that electrons might be made of light, that you might be made of confined radiance, that the distinction between matter and energy might be less solid than it seems. And in that remembrance, the ordinary world might shimmer just a little, might reveal just for a moment the extraordinary physics that underlies every mundane moment. The question that brought us here tonight, are electrons made of light, remains unanswered, but we've discovered something perhaps more valuable than an answer. We've found the beauty in the question itself, the way it opens doors we didn't know existed, the way it connects the cosmic to the quantum, the way it reveals the mystery in the everyday. Whether electrons are literally made of light or whether they're both made of something deeper, the fact that we can ask the question, that we can investigate it with mathematics and experiments, that we can contemplate it as we fall asleep, this itself is a kind of miracle. You're drifting now in that space between waking and sleeping where thoughts become dreams, where logic softens into imagery, where the boundaries that seem so solid in daylight become permeable. In this space, electrons and photons merge and separate in endless dances. Light condenses into matter, and matter dissolves back into light. You are both wave and particle, both observer and observed, both question and answer. Let yourself sink deeper into this peaceful darkness, knowing that you are held by forces you don't fully understand, composed of particles that might be made of light, sustained by processes that depend on quantum mechanics, conscious through mechanisms that remain largely mysterious. You don't need to understand it all. You need only rest, carried by the same physical laws that govern stars and atoms, electrons and photons, all the universe in its beautiful, mysterious wholeness. As your thoughts finally dissolve into the approaching dreams, remember that every mystery in physics is also a mystery about you, about your nature, your existence, your place in the cosmic order. The question of whether electrons are made of light is also a question about whether you are made of light, whether consciousness is made of light, whether reality itself is woven from radiance temporarily clothed in the appearance of matter. These are not questions that demand immediate answers. They are invitations to wonder, to remain curious, to find beauty in uncertainty. As sleep finally takes you, you become like an electron in its quantum state, undefined, probabilistic, existing in all possible dream states simultaneously until the morning's observation collapses you back into classical waking consciousness. But for now, in this moment, you are potential itself, suspended between states, between understanding and mystery, between matter and light. The universe continues its patient work around you and within you. Electrons and photons dance their eternal dance, stars burn and planets orbit, and somewhere, in laboratories and offices around the world, physicists continue to probe the mysteries we've explored tonight, adding their small pieces to the vast puzzle of existence. And you, unique arrangement of electrons and photons, temporary pattern in the quantum fields, are about to enter the mystery of sleep, where the ordinary rules of physics seem to bend, where time flows differently, where the impossible becomes possible. In your dreams, you might solve the mystery of whether electrons are made of light, or you might discover even deeper mysteries, questions we haven't learned to ask yet, wonders we haven't imagined. But that's for dreams to reveal. For now, it's enough to rest in the great unknown, to float in the sea of possibility, to trust that whether or not electrons are made of light, whether or not we ever fully understand the nature of matter and energy, The universe will continue its beautiful dance, and you will continue to be part of it, made of star stuff and light, mystery and wonder, drifting now into peaceful sleep where all questions dissolve into the quiet darkness and only rest remains. The photons from distant stars continue their billion-year journeys toward Earth. The electrons in your body continue their quantum dance. The electromagnetic field stretches out from you in all directions, connecting you to everything. And as you finally surrender to sleep, you join the cosmic mystery not as someone who must solve it, but as someone who is part of it, made of it, dreaming within it. Perhaps electrons are made of light. Perhaps light is made of something else. Perhaps we are all made of mathematics or consciousness or information or something that doesn't have a name. These questions will wait for tomorrow, for next year, for next century. Tonight, they are simply lullabies, gentle mysteries to carry you into sleep, where you can rest in the heart of the unknown, peaceful, safe, part of the endless. Transformation between matter and light, between question and answer, between waking and dreams. And as you drift into sleep, you remain part of this quiet universe, wrapped in its laws, carried by its mysteries, gently, peacefully, into the night where electrons and photons continue their eternal dance, where light and matter merge and separate in patterns too beautiful for words, where you exist as both particle and wave, both matter and light, both question and answer, dissolving now into dreams where anything is possible, where electrons can be made of light, where light can be made of dreams, where you are exactly what you've always been, a mystery exploring itself, peacefully, gently, into the soft darkness of sleep. End.